So this is Prismatic Mask of Bakris. The reason we call it power shifting into the light is because Mask of Bakris is typically a darkness-based subclass exotic, but with the onset of Prismatic, we're going to be able to equip the Stasis subclass in Prismatic and still be able to shift into the light to be able to get Radiant, Amplified, Ionic Traces, and still retain one of the darkness subclass buffs of Frost Armor. So let's take a moment to break down what we can do here with Mask of Bakris. Let's get into it. But before we get any further, if you could take a moment to really help support my channel by hitting the like button on this video and also subscribing if you do appreciate the content that I'm creating here. Thank you so much. Let's begin by talking about Mask of Bakris. Mask of Bakris will replace your class ability with Shift if you have a Stasis super equipped. This is essentially a fast horizontal teleporting action of 10 meters. It will grant you 4 stacks of Arc and Stasis Weapon Surge for 11 seconds. Class ability energy is going to be locked to 0% while the Weapon Surge buff is active. 4 stacks is going to be a buff of 25%. That's for both Arc weapons and Stasis weapons, allowing you the flexibility to choose many different weapons that can help complement this build style. So we're going to be able to use up our leg armor mods for things other than surges, but you can still run them to have them in the neutral game setting if you choose to do so. They will just not stack when you do a light shift. To enable the use of Mask of Bakris on Prismatic, we will have a Stasis super equipped in Silence and Squall. This super was buffed with the release of the final shape, increasing its damage and slow rate tick by about 40%, as well as increasing its travel speed by 10%. Another way that we're going to shift into the light is with the artifact mod Radiant Orbs. While we have a solar or prismatic subclass equipped, picking up an orb of power will make us radiant. As for the melee in the build, we're going to be using Withering Blade, which provides 2 charges. Landing 1 charge will slow an enemy, landing both charges freezes an enemy. We're going to be using Gambler's Dodge as our dodge of choice to be able to refund one of those melee charges. First aspect that we're going to be using in the build is the newest aspect for hunters, the Ascension aspect. What this does is while you are airborne and pressing X, it'll consume your class ability, you'll spin up in the air, you'll get amplified, nearby allies get amplified, and nearby enemies will become jolted. This allows us to gain access to amplified as well through rapid arc weapon kills. That gives us the additional benefit of plus 50 mobility and plus 40 handling. And with this season's artifact mod, Galvanic Armor, we're also able to take advantage of some insane damage resistance by becoming amplified either through those rapid arc weapon kills or by activating Ascension. Next, I want to move on to talking about the second aspect of the build, that is going to be Threaded Spectre. Threaded Spectre is cool because if we're not just using our class ability to instantly become amplified and get damage resistance, then we're able to use our light shift, and when we are using our light shift, we're going to create that strand decoy. That's going to draw the aggro, just like the aggro was drew of that anti-barrier champion. That's going to allow us to be able to stay safe while we're amplified with our light shift buff and put in a lot of damage. We've covered the aspects, the melees, as well as the class ability and the exotic armor. Now we're going to get into the fragments. Fragment number 1 is Facet of Ruin. Powered melee hits against targets make you radiant for 5 seconds. Because Withering Blade provides 2 copies of a melee and we have a Gambler's Dodge to be able to refund a melee, we have 3 ways of sending out a melee. We also have the ability to pop Transcendence and be able to gain our abilities back immensely, and then we'll be able to have high frequent uptime on this radiant buff. Another way that we're going to be able to keep our abilities flowing is by being amplified and gaining Ionic Traces. So let's talk about the next fragment. Fragment number 2 is Facet of Awakening. Rapid dark or light kills generates a respective elemental pickup. An example of a respective elemental pickup would be getting rapid arc weapon kills generating an Ionic Trace, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing in the build most frequently because of Mask of Bakris. But other ones we can generate, that would be Stasis Shards, Fire Sprites, Tangles, Void Breaches. Next up is Facet of Balance. Rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. Essentially what this will boil down to is that killing 3 enemies within a short period of time with light damage will grant 10% melee energy. Killing 3 enemies within a short period of each other with dark damage will grant 10% grenade energy. Fragment number 4 is Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power provides Frost Armor because we are on a Stasis Super. Frost Armor is one of the newest subclass defensive verbs. It's the one attached to Stasis, and what it does is provides a little bit of damage resistance per stack. Since everybody in the game creates orbs to be able to generate their super energy as well as armor charges, we might as well take advantage of being able to get some extra damage resistance that we're going to pair together with the artifact mod Radiant Orbs and combining the fire buff with the Stasis buff of being able to get Radiant and being able to protect ourselves with Frost Armor. Fragment number 5 in the build is Facet of Protection. When surrounded by 3+ enemies, gain 15% damage resistance. This is actually going to move up to 32% damage resistance when you are Transcendent, because Transcendent provides an additional 20% damage reduction. So we can add together the damage resistance from being amplified with Galvanic Armor, Frost Armor, and then we also have Facet of Protection for some extra survivability. Now for the 6th and final fragment, Facet of Hope. With active elemental buffs, gain faster class ability recharge. Essentially what this is going to do is provide you with 60% additional base class ability regeneration while affected by any elemental buff, and that is going to be amplified, and that is going to be radiant. We're going to be able to have those quite often, as well as Frost Armor. So we're going to have multiple elemental buffs that we're going to have up to help us keep our class ability energy flowing after we light shift with Bakris. Next, I want to take a minute to talk about some of my favorite weapons in this loadout. Risk Runner being one of the favorites for generating ionic traces and keeping Arc Conductor active. Another one, like from the thumbnail, is Thunderlord, which is really great for taking care of Overload champions. This is an honorable mentions list. I have some different ones in here that are mainly just my personal favorites that I like to use. Things like Cloud Strike swapping to a Wendigo. You also have things like Legend of Bakris or Anarchy swapping. Next thing I want to do here is take a minute to look at the armor mods for the build. First off, starting with the helmet, we're going to be running 1 copy of Power Preservation if you're in a team-based setting, 1 copy of Harmonic Siphon, and then 1 copy of Arc Siphon. Now this is going to change depending on if you are in a team setting or not. If you're not in a team setting, go for a Finder mod. For our Gauntlet armor mods, we're going to be running 1 copy of Firepower, 1 copy of Focusing Strike, and 1 copy of Impact Induction. As for our chest, we're just pretty much running basic resist mods here. 1 copy of Arc Resist, 1 copy of Solar Resist, and 1 copy of Concussive Dampener. As for our leg armor mods, because we don't need to really run surges here, I'm going to be taking advantage of using Innervation, Recuperation, as well as Orbs of Restoration. I'd rather have the extra ability energy rather than have to deal with running copies of surge mods. As for our class item here, we're going to be running 1 copy of Bomber, 1 copy of Reaper, and 1 copy of Powerful Attraction. Activating our Exotic Armor's perk, the Light Shift, we'll be able to collect any orbs of power near us. The next weapon kill that we get after activating that Light Shift will create an orb of power, and then we're also going to get a little bit of grenade energy when we do activate that Light Shift. Now, aside from any specific anti-champion weapon mod perks, the only other things that I'm going to recommend to you is taking Overcharged Armory, as well as taking Authorized Elemental Charge. You could use this, or you could go with Authorized Mod Scavenger for something on your legs. When it comes to the third row here, we're going to be talking about Elemental Siphon, rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon that match our super. We have a Stasis super, would create an elemental pickup that's going to match that. So we would get some stasis shards, which obviously are going to give us some melee energy. That's going to be very helpful if we're trying to chain our melee constantly. And we can use something like Ager's Scepter to be able to accomplish that as well. Stasis weapon final blows against slowed or frozen targets releases a burst that slows. Creeping Chill will help you take advantage of that perk, Elemental Siphon. Counter Energy is going to be great in getting you some extra ability energy when you're stunning a champion. We've already talked about Radiant Orbs and Galvanic Armor. And then if you're using Cloud Strike, make sure that you take Sniper's Meditation. Otherwise, go with Transference and Shield Crush. But that's everything for the build. Thank you all so much for watching. Everyone have a wonderful day. Peace.